nerves and the bowel. Parasites. Before the start of racing, it is essential that the birds are parasite-free. To this end, if parasites are detected in the droppings, or a dropping analysis is not possible, the following protocol is adopted. For hairworm and roundworm, external mites and air sac mites, moxidectin, 5 ml to 1 liter for 24 hours. For tapeworms, moxidectin plus, 5 ml to 1 liter for 24 hours. For coccidia, toltrazural coccidiocide solution, 1 ml to 2 liters of water for 48 hours. For lice, dipping in permethrin solution. Wet canker. If wet canker is detected on testing, has been a loft problem in earlier years, or a test is not possible, all birds are given a 2 to 3 day course of turbasol. If this is extended to a 7-day course, it will kill any hexamida that may be present. Respiratory infection. If respiratory infection, including mycoplasmal air sac infection, has been a problem in earlier years, then a 5 to 15 day course of Doxy-T is given. If respiratory infection purely due to chlamydia has been a problem, Doxy-T can be replaced by doxycycline 12%. The course of Doxy-T or doxycycline 12% should be completed 2 to 3 weeks before the first race and should be followed by a 2-3 day course of Provoc. It is best, though not essential, to remove the grit, sand or other minerals during Doxy-T treatment. Supplementation. In addition to actual medication, other preparations can be used to not only maintain health, which is really just the bottom line, but actually promote fitness. Multivitamins, mineral supplements and conditioning oils can be used to build fitness as race day approaches. The 5,000 entrants in the VHA 500-mile race from Burke to Melbourne in 1993, head for home. Race programs. Principal aim, to maintain winning form through the entire season by good management and the maintenance of health. During competition, medication is used to maintain health. It is vital that the birds are completely free of any health problems to give their best. Winning birds are always not only fit but also healthy. If the natural immunity they have formed is not strong enough to keep them healthy during the inherent stress of racing, then medication is used to ensure that health is maintained, so that success can be ongoing and unnecessary losses avoided. Unless the genetic base of the birds kept has changed, or the way they are managed is altered, then it is very likely that any health problems that occurred in previous years will predictably reappear in a particular loft. This is why successful preventative programs can be reapplied to particular lofts year after year. Some health problems are more likely to occur in particular types of loft and in lofts in particular locations. This explains why a program that works well in one loft is inappropriate in another. Medication serves another purpose. Out of the race season, exposure of loft members to birds from other lofts is minimal, while once racing starts there is sudden and immediate high exposure to many birds from many different lofts. In this way, birds become exposed to different strains of disease-causing organisms, in particular strains of wet canker and respiratory infection. Because these strains may not be resident in their own loft, they cannot possibly have developed an immunity to them. For this reason, disease can flare up, even in well-managed lofts, with resultant sudden loss of form and variable losses. Medication is used to minimize the impact of this exposure. When to treat. Veterinary attitude has changed since 1990 as to how to treat birds on race return. Before 1990, many lofts did not contain the wet canker and respiratory strains that are common today. Treatment was aimed at preventing or delaying the entry of these organisms into lofts that were still free of them. To this end, it was recommended that medications such as turbasol and risphite were placed in the water of returning race birds, usually at slightly higher doses. The medication that the birds took in with the single big drink that they had upon return, although not enough to treat an active infection, was often adequate to prevent infection establishing following a recent exposure. Since this time, through sales, transfers of birds, etc., wet canker and mycoplasmal air sac infection have become steadily more and more common, so that now most lofts do in fact contain some strains of these organisms. Treatment protocols have moved away from treating returning race birds, although this is still worthwhile in some lofts, to periodic short courses of medication to keep resident wet canker and respiratory strains in check during the stress of racing. These short courses also serve to lessen the impact of exposure to a new strain on loft health. Regular short courses keep a new strain under control while the birds establish a natural immunity to it. There are other practical considerations. To be effective in preventing the entry of disease, medication for returning race birds must be given after their return but before these birds mix with other birds in the loft. This usually means treating them as soon as they return. This makes it impossible to use other useful post-race treatments such as electrolytes and probiotics. If returning race birds are treated the next day, i.e. Sunday, this means they must be kept apart from other birds in the loft until this time. If returning race birds have mixed with other non-race birds, there is no point in treating just them on Sunday. Under most management systems, it is important from the bird's motivation point of view that they be allowed access to their perch, box or mate as soon as possible after return. This can be difficult if medication is delayed until Sunday. In addition, some post-race drugs are bitter, which can deter returning race birds from drinking fully, while in fact it is very important that returning birds drink well in order to rehydrate. These days, the usual recommendation is to focus on recovery from the race on Saturday and then to use either Sunday and Monday or Monday and Tuesday as the days to give any medication that may be necessary. Usually all birds in the loft, i.e. those that have raced that weekend and those that haven't, are treated. If a fancier tosses non-race birds on Sunday or there are stragglers from Saturday's race, then usually Monday and Tuesday are used. To speed race recovery on Saturday, I recommend either electrolytes, multivitamins or probiotics be given. If the race has been hot, or especially hard, or if the birds look distressed upon return, I think it is best to give electrolytes. Alternatively, if the race has not been especially taxing, multivitamins or probiotics are preferred. I find that the droppings from returned race birds the following morning are more likely to be brown and tight and that the birds will maintain a feather down drop if probiotics are given as they return. Health monitoring. All disease problems that can affect form, except wet canker and respiratory infection, can be detected from the droppings. Birds that have wet canker or respiratory infection because they are sick are not able to mount a good immune response, and so opportunists in the bowel, particularly E. coli and thrush, sometimes take advantage of the bird's run-down condition and multiply. The presence of elevated numbers of these organisms alerts the fancier to the possibility of these problems. However, their presence is by no means specific, and also, to confuse things, not all birds with wet canker or respiratory infection will have these changes. I recommend that droppings be regularly examined microscopically during racing, usually every 1 to 3 weeks. This detects all other problems and not only enables effective treatment for them but also avoids treatments that may be unnecessary. Wet canker and respiratory infection are the two most serious and common causes of poor race performance and yet are the two most difficult to detect by the fancier in the loft. Both problems are now so common that I feel that it is not possible to achieve consistent success without vigilant monitoring or regular treatment for them. Wet canker and respiratory infection sooner or later will catch up with the lax fancier. Wet canker can be definitively diagnosed and accurately monitored with crop flushing because the causative agent, the living trichomonad, is seen. Respiratory infection can sometimes be diagnosed with a crop flush. In a respiratory infection, inflammatory material drains from the sinuses through the slot in the roof of the mouth into the throat or alternatively is coughed up from the inflamed windpipe lining into the throat. A crop flush gathers this material, which can be detected microscopically. Wet canker and respiratory infection are very common problems during racing. The fancier who does not control these well, and sometimes this will mean the use of medication, can expect to lose more birds and not clock as many prize winners as the fancier who does. Medication. It is important to remember that antibiotics should not be given closer than 2 days before basketing. All cause some disruption to the normal bowel bacteria, more so with Batril and sulfa-AVS, less so with Doxy-T, Risphite and doxycycline, which then take several days to re-establish. An antibiotic course even of only 1 to 2 days during racing should always be followed by 1 day on Provoc in order to replace the normal bacteria as quickly as possible. Turbasol is not an antibiotic, only killing canker organisms, and so therefore can be given any day of the week. However, when wet canker is a problem, Turbasol is best given early in the week so that the birds have a chance to lift after having the trichomonads cleared. E. coli and thrush during racing are usually treated with Provoc. This can be given any day of the week, and indeed more and more successful lofts are not only using it for this purpose but are also using it to advantage to maintain a healthy beneficial population of bowel bacteria at all times during racing. I usually recommend Wednesday and Sunday, for Thursday night basketing, as the best treatment days for Provoc because the first dose sets the birds up for the race and the second helps them recover. However, Provoc should always be the first line treatment when the droppings become green or mushy during racing. It is worth mentioning here the mixing of drugs. The two most commonly mixed drugs are anti-canker drugs such as Turbasol and antibiotics such as Doxy-T. Many flyers do this with success. However, recent evidence shows that mixing any antibiotic with Turbasol does slightly decrease the potency of both. Also, I am concerned that putting several things in the water makes the water less palatable for the birds. This means the birds drink less and may not receive an adequate dose of either medication. However, there are some instances when these disadvantages have to be weighed against the number of days available. With a limited number of days, we sometimes need to mix medications so that the birds receive all medications that they need. Supplementation. A range of conditioning agents and multivitamins can be used during the season and, although not directly treating disease, do help the birds resist disease by promoting their health generally. I feel that it is good to incorporate a good quality multivitamin, such as Multivite Plus, in the loft health protocol once or twice weekly. During racing, birds can miss meals through being late and sometimes eat irregularly through being away from the loft racing. The use of a multivitamin helps ensure that they are not lacking something in their diet. Seed oils together with yeasts when added to the grain increase the energy and calorie content of the seed mix and are a way of making an especially nutritious meal for the birds. Some flyers use such agents always on a particular day of the week,